We're excited to be here with Jeff Marr. Jeff is a friend of mine, and he's been doing lending for a couple of decades. And before that, he was a financial planner. And I always enjoy sitting down with Jeff and talking about what's going on in the markets and interest rates and all kinds of stuff like that, because he comes from the perspective of the financial services industry before the lending industry. So, Jeff, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
And Jeff also is an investor, which is right up our alley.
I'm an investor
In
real estate. I'm also a stock market investor. So I feel like I straddle both sides of the two traditional marketplaces where most Americans might park their money and create
Do you ever
wealth.
feel like your legs are getting too far apart with this straddling?
I do go back and forth, but no, I've done it long enough, and I don't have many other hobbies. These are my hobbies. I'm a financial nerd, and
I love it. This is why we enjoy talking together.
Yeah.
And this is why we wanted to do this today, is because I love that you're a financial nerd.
Yeah, and I still remember first getting introduced to you from Mike Farr, and this is still true to this day. I haven't met any other agents other than you guys that really live, eat, and breathe real estate investing. And
I think we're nerds too, Mike.
Yeah, we are.
There's many other. I can't tell you how many. There's many agents that don't own real estate themselves.
Right.
And I feel like if you can't walk the walk, then how can you talk the talk, so to speak?
Right.
And so that.
Okay. So when did we meet?
I want to say 2011-ish.
Okay. I know it's been well over a decade. So.
Yeah. We were still relatively new to our office.
Okay.
When we were Alpine Mortgage.
And we were younger too.
When we were younger. Yes. And I still remember your 190 column spreadsheet that you had created at one point. And of measuring all the attributes
I ran out
of a piece of.
I ran out. I don't know how many there were, but I'm pretty sure there were more than 190, because I ran out and I had to actually get a different one. Yeah, that was to analyze property. So I would download the property.
Excel said no more.
Yeah.
You can't have any more columns.
I do Excel a little more efficiently now.
Yeah. Well, I was my first. I just remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, how does he keep up? How does he?" And you used to proactively visit homes that went on the market.
Occasionally,
yeah. And so that was the seed.
I think that's one of the best ways to actually understand the market and have talking points for people. And you learn stuff because you're just exposed to different stuff as you run into it. And you didn't know you were going to learn it. So you learn it by running into it. You're running into it because you're actually out doing it. Yeah. Like getting in front of it, like running into it. So.
Well, I knew early on that real estate and real estate investing was your passion.
Yeah.
And you've shown that all the years since then. So, and then I've met Mike along the ways, and you've been in real estate
46 years,
Uh,
something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, 46.
Wow.
And working with investors ever since, from day one. So, yeah, long history. We have a long history on this table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good time. So how'd you get into, well, tell us a little bit about your story. First of all, how you got into financial services, and then why you got out of financial services into lending.
Well, this may sound kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but a dissolution of the first marriage. That was my impetus or catalyst for going out of commercial printing into becoming a stockbroker, and then stockbroker / financial advisor. So I still need to write a nice thank you card to my first wife for for leaving, and because she created she was the catalyst. And a good buddy of mine that I worked my first job, I used to live in Eureka, he called me up right after the divorce was kind of in its early stages, and said, there's an opening with it was Waterhouse Securities back in the late 90s in downtown Sacramento. Are you interested? I said, well, any other time in my life, I'd probably say no, but not now. I am interested. and I got the job, and that lasted about 6 or 7 years. I thought I was going to do it indefinitely.
Right.
Until a particular new manager came along, and we kind of went, and I knew on day 2 that, I might not be here that much longer.
So when did you get out of the industry? Why didn't you just transition to another?
Yeah, I looked around,
yeah.
and this was 2004, and it wasn't a good time in the market for the stock market.
Okay.
We had we're getting over the .com bubble, and then a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you talk to this guy at Stanford Mortgage? And he had just done my refi for me. And that was the seed that was planted to look into becoming a lender.
Okay.
And then a year later, I made that official and started in 05. And, I got married in 03.
Okay.
Or I met my wife in 03. We got married in 05.
Okay.
And my wife was the one she grew up, her parents were longtime real estate investors in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And so she already had the seed planted that she wanted to invest in real estate. And she already converted her home. The second home that she bought was in Folsom. And after I came into the picture, she had already converted that to a rental. Okay. And then she wanted to buy more. So then we bought a few more ourselves.
Okay.
And she took on the homes that her parents passed. So she and her sister took on those as rentals. And then, at one point we had 13 doors. One of them was a fourplex, and 8 other properties. And so, but
now my observation of you over the last moderately long time, is that it took you a while to get into understanding residential investing and to saying, okay, this is a good way to invest. Tell us about that journey. I mean, I'm assuming I'm not incorrect there.
No.
Because I was looking from the outside. It was just us talking. And
if I hadn't married someone who was already had a super high level of comfort in residential real estate, and even though I was a lender, I don't know if I would have made the transition. She dragged me along. And I felt like I needed to be drug along because, hey, I do home loans and I can do loans for people to help them buy rental properties.
Right.
So I should know about this. And there's a difference between knowing the rules on the lending rules for acquiring real estate and actually being the landlord and qualifying tenants and visiting your property every 6 months or a year, and having that mindset. And so, that took a little while. And the whole time I'm investing in the stock market, and because you and I, we always have conversations of comparing, is it better to buy stocks or is it better to buy real estate?
I was just going to ask that question. What's your opinion?
It's my simplified answer is you do both, but you do both relative to your level of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought of this analogy over the weekend. Investing in the stock market is like if you compare a tortoise and a hare and they're having a race.
Yeah.
The stock market is definitely the hare. It's all over the place. It changes its mind. It goes back and forth. It goes sideways. Investing in real estate is more of the tortoise. It goes slow, but it always goes forward.
You know how the story ends.
Tortoise wins.
The tortoise wins. Yeah. And I don't have any problem saying that.
And so I want to take your opinion on, okay, you've got the hare, which is stocks, and you've got the tortoise. Like, how do they both win? Because it's not as if people don't make lots and lots of money in stocks.
The people who make lots and lots of money in stocks are the ones who have spent a considerable amount of time. They've made an investment into gaining knowledge about how the stock market works. Because the stock market it's another analogy is, oh, are you good playing a game of chess? Set up 12 chess games that are all tied to each other. How good are you at playing chess?
So you lose this pawn.
With that, one might take down others. So how comfortable are you doing that versus to me, the most, if I'm going to describe how someone can get into real estate investing, you buy your first home as your primary residence, and markets, if the markets behave, if interest rates didn't go through the roof, didn't go up quite a bit, and over time they've come down. But real estate is, there's 2 years out of the past 45, 46 years that have gone down in the United States.
Right. Yeah. Across the U.S.
Yeah. There's a couple years that have been flat.
Yeah.
There was 5 years, and they were all recent, 07 to 2011, that were down. But other than that, real estate has gone up. It's gone up more on a yearly basis than the stock market. But
how do you mean that? It's gone more up
just
on a
if we look
basis?
at up years versus
up
down
years versus down years. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, not percentage, because stock market's gone up 20%.
Yeah, the stock market on a percentage base, it's more volatile.
Yeah.
Compared to housing prices.
So how do you win with the rabbit? You said learn all about that. That is, the people who know the most about the market are the best able to make the decisions that are going to perform well.
You need to find an area that you know really well and take action. Okay. And you also need to be able to anticipate when to leave a market. That is the hardest thing. Okay, because when it comes to stocks, you can own a stock. You're going long a stock. Yeah. And there are people who profit off of the downward movement of the market, and you generally do it on a given stock. That is called shorting, shorting the market or shorting that stock. Usually people's mind works one way or another. They're usually a proponent of the market. They want to stay long. They don't want to think about the downsides because they believe in the long term. Everyone says in the long term, you always win.
Except when it goes away.
Yeah. And by the way, there's one really easy way to invest in stocks. There's a set it and forget it. You buy a broad-based fund, the S&P 500. Vanguard is kind of infamous for creating mutual funds back in I think it was the 50s or the 60s. And you open up an account, you buy this fund, and you do monthly distributions. It's called dollar cost averaging. Yeah. And you do that for decades.
But ones that track the S&P or
so that's a set it.
Track the indexes is what you're saying.
That's a set it and forget it.
Yeah.
So there's been one 10-year period where if you put your money in to the S&P 500, 10 years later it was worth less. Only one.
That was during the 70s, right?
I believe so. I believe so.
If you bought in the 60s and 10
other
years
than
later,
that,
yeah.
but that's, but so if you take on a strategy where you're completely diversified when it comes to stock exposure, and you, again, dollar cost average, you do regular purchases, and you just don't, that's a strategy. You don't have to think about that.
Right.
And other than that, people tend to do variations of that. Some people get their sole experience is they buy maybe a penny stock or two because an uncle told them to do this and didn't tell them why, just said get in, and that was their sole exposure. You can't do that in real estate. You can't buy a house. You can't buy a small portion of a house. You can't buy $100 shed somewhere and call that.
It's because it's attached to the ground.
Yeah. You kind of have to buy the whole thing.
Yeah.
But in the stock market, you can do that.
Right.
You can, there's tens of thousands of stocks, and most of them are not large cap stocks. They're the smaller caps. They're emerging companies, and they tend to have they're more exciting. Why buy a company that is, going to produce X amount of revenues every year and it doesn't go up that much when you can buy something that has all this promise?
Yeah. So
I'm being really sarcastic right now, by the way.
Sure.
Well, every stock is different. They all perform differently. Yeah. So
it's more of a higher risk when you're doing that. So as you know, I remember you bought a stock last year.
My first stock.
That was your first.
That was my first.
And it went to zero.
Yeah.
Folded up, just went away.
I remember you telling me about that.
So it was great. It was my first foray into the stock market. I've always found the good Lord helps me lead with education, not with profit. And so I thought it was classic that I lead when my first stock goes to zero. My second stock went down too. And the third one, I don't know because I haven't checked it since I bought it. So, but I think I checked it once and it was up a little bit. Anyway,
okay.
So I tried to dabble. I'm not there yet to regularly dabbling in the stock market, but
is it?
You can lose all your money in the stock market.
You sure can.
Yep.
It's hard to in real estate lose all your money, but as you're saying, it costs a lot. Your entry fee is much higher. If you're buying a $100,000 property, which is well below the average, I think the average in the United States is just over $400,000 now. So to buy something that it's $100,000, you got to go search for it, and then that's 25% down because that's what makes sense, at least that, plus closing costs, plus reserves. So you're looking at probably $35,000, $40,000 just as an entry fee in a real estate.
There are markets across the United States that make sense, but question is what kind of research do you have to do to even find and identify those kind of markets?
But
they're
may
out
not
there.
Like the tenants in those markets.
Yeah, there's trade-offs for everything that we do. So some of the markets we've looked at kind of make sense at the lower price point, the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 price points.
Yeah.
But it's like anything. It's like the penny stock. There is a little higher level of risk involved. When you're buying at price point, may not be the best neighborhoods, but they're not the worst either. So, in my mind, I look at the stock market and I look at real estate. They are different, no question. So when you get to the tax standpoint, when you get to look at the investing standpoint, capital gain has been eliminated from stocks. So anytime you sell something, you got a big tax on it and you got to track it all. Whereas in real estate, you got all kinds of other advantages within that circle. So it's quite interesting. So
once again, back to the rabbit.
Yeah.
So in stocks, how do you? I don't know. What's your nugget on stocks? Like after all these years, there's the invest and forget. And then there's the person who has lots of intellectual capital into the marketplace so that they understand it. and then they can invest better. Do you just recommend either those two, or obviously I'm getting your biased opinion, which is exactly what I want. What's the middle ground? Do you recommend it for making income in stocks? Not to go to the middle ground, or if so, then what?
I have found over recent years that I have a handful of clients, loan clients, that I will have discussions, tell me about, do you do any stock market investing? And the easy thing to always start out with when it comes to the stock market investing is, let's look at your 401k. Do you have a 401k? Do you have a 403b? And those will generally be a handful of funds. But I've had a couple clients that I've had just a couple discussions about, their foray into owning individual stocks. And boy, I try to, this is a two-way street or a double-edged sword. I'm seldom ever going to tell them what exactly they should do. I want to enhance their ability to research. I want to give them some high-level perspectives for someone who's been watching the market since the late 90s and went through the dot-com bubble, went through the housing, the housing, 2008, what was called the housing collapse.
Yeah.
I just want to give them some points of view, really.
Right.
But it's again, the stock market. You can even kind of put cryptos under the stock market heading, because you turn on CNBC and they have a crypto, the crypto price flash, or Bitcoin every single day. and trading cryptos is not the stock market at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have exchanges, like Robinhood is one of them.
Okay.
They're probably the biggest, where you can trade stocks, and you can trade cryptos, and you can trade treasuries, and you can do stock options. That's a whole other avenue that people can get into. The point I'm trying to make is that it's really varied. There is no, like I said, with real estate, how do you, what's the way for maybe a younger couple to contemplate, becoming a real estate investor? Well, take your first home you bought, that maybe your starter home, and maybe you're upgrading, and you convert that to a rental. And if that works out, well, now you have your first foray into investing in real estate.
Yeah.
And you can do that every 2 years. Theoretically, as you know, the 2 out of 5 year rule to avoid a capital gain.
And isn't the financing for single family personal residence different than investor financing?
Absolutely. It's always been different. There are, in our world, we call them loan level price adjustments, LLPAs, but think of it as a penalty. So you get the best financing when it's a single family home and your primary residence. Those are the two. That's where, nirvana. And if you're at a 780 FICO score, now you've satisfied the cream of the crop, for getting the best financing terms. And assuming you don't have a bankruptcy from 3 years ago and you're trying to go conventional, because you still could have a really high FICO score, even though you did a BK. It means you worked really hard to improve your credit. But then, assuming there's nothing like that, where we're going to run into seasoning requirements on derogatory events, then you're going to get the best financing terms. When we look at a second home or a rental property, which, by the way, the LLPAs, the adjustments, are about the same now on a second home.
Really? As a rental property?
As a rental property, yes.
Is it still about a half point? That is a half percentage point of interest higher than...
Yeah, correct. Okay. It's still in that territory.
Okay.
So technically, if the interest is 6% on an owner-occupied, then it's 6.5% on non.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it used to be for that second home that you got the same rate. You needed 10% down.
Mm-hmm.
You can still only put 10% down on a second home, but you're going to get the same terms as if it was an investment property. So there has been scenarios recently that I've run where it's like, well, wait a minute. Here's the nice thing about an investment property compared to a second home. Second home, we're not going to give you credit for offsetting rental income.
Mm-hmm.
Second home is for your quiet enjoyment.
Right.
And furthermore, if we do a loan as a second home, and every investor has the right to pull tax returns the next couple of years after the loan's funded. If that investor sees rental income on that property that we said was going to be a second home,
Mm-hmm.
now you just created a really bad situation for yourself.
Would that be mortgage fraud, or is that?
That's mortgage fraud.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, we had politicians that did that.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, Mike, don't say that.
If you
It's
can,
fine for them.
but
We're the second class citizens.
mortgage fraud's a gray area, though.
It
Well, okay, so I have a question about that, because let's say I go and buy a second home, which is intended to be my second home, and then I have some financial difficulties, and rather than using it as my second home, I need to make it an investment property. Is that still looked at as mortgage fraud, or is that? I'm not speaking for.
If there's a make sense reason, yeah.
So as long as you can provide a reason, hey, this is why we did it. We just did it spuriously. We didn't try and get this loan with the intent of doing it a different way.
They call that intent.
Okay.
So if the intent up front was to do something and then life gets in the way and you have to switch, you didn't have the intent to do that up front.
Right.
But you got to prove it. And that's the challenge.
Right. Well, write a letter, make them feel good about it.
Yeah.
And we now have a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the CFPB, that is the sheriff.
Do they prosecute that kind of stuff?
Well, right now they're offline.
Oh, they are.
They're offline.
Really?
They haven't been funded. So
that's
what I mean.
Okay.
So are those people sitting at work and not doing anything, or are they sitting at home and not getting paid?
To be in all honesty, I haven't done any research on their exact status. It's just a while ago, sometime in 2024, actually, was when the kind of the wheels were put in place to, because they don't have the checks and balances. They were an agency created to obviously oversee the lending world, any credit issuing company, so the big banks, the mortgage companies, but they didn't have to answer to anyone. And so that's always been kind of an issue.
So the question is when they were funded and they were operating and doing what they were supposed to do, job description wise, were they going after and actually prosecuting and
yes,
doing whatever they're supposed to do? Okay.
Yes, they were.
So what kind of things were they prosecuting?
Boy, it was mostly in the larger banks. There was I want to say it was Chase that they were fairly close to, and I'm going off of vague memory, but they were fairly close to going after whatever infraction. I do not recall the infraction that they were being prosecuted on, but right before that was going to be finalized, they basically again got taken offline.
So wouldn't the prosecution have continued? I mean, if it was already in court,
it would have. Yeah.
Of course, I guess if nobody's paying the lawyers, they don't show up.
Yeah. But that was.
This is during the Biden administration, before.
This was in the Biden administration. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. This relates to.
And I'm not saying don't worry, go ahead and commit all kinds of real estate or mortgage fraud.
By the way, do not commit mortgage fraud. That's a bad thing to do. It's unethical also. So just don't do it. There you go. Notice to the public. Public service announcement. Okay, so different with regard to the lenders. What about wraps? Are you seeing any lenders, or have you heard of anything on a wrap? Because I've had a couple of clients that have done wraps in the past, where that is there's an existing mortgage on a property, and they sell it to the new buyer, and the buyer takes over the project subject to that lending, and may or may not have a second to the owner. It's not. Uh, I haven't seen. I don't think I've ever seen any assumptions go through.
I
Ever
think
in my
that's
career.
also referred to as a subject to.
Yeah,
I think that's the same thing.
Subject to.
Yeah.
But are you seeing any? And the difficulty is if the lender wants, because it was not an assumed loan that the lender could call the loan due. Have you seen anything like any lenders calling loans due?
Are they exercising the due on sale clause?
Yeah, because the property sold.
To be honest, I have not heard of that happening. I can tell you that the premise of having a loan, having a property change title, but not having the financing change ownership. You know, usually you pay off the old lender, there's a new lender. It could be the same lender, but it would be a different loan number under the new homeowner's name. When this wrap or this subject to process happens, the current lender is kind of left out of the mix there. They're not approving the new person. Right. They're just, so it is an issue. It is, disingenuous to assume that the current lender is going to be okay with this, because now you have it's like acting like the home's being sold, but it's not sold, but it,
Well, no, the home's sold because the title transferred, but the loan carried with the property.
Yeah.
So the first lender, whoever originated the loan for them, they're still online, so to speak. Their credit is still at risk if it doesn't get paid.
Yeah.
So the way to look at that is, you can do that. I'm not seeing anything being called. They're not calling the loans, but it is a liability.
Yeah.
And it is something you have to be concerned about. So if that strategy is exercised, you need to know all the risks. Yeah. Because there is a risk there. Not that we recommend it. It's just be aware that you can get creative in this real estate market. Yeah. But there is risk and liability that could be happening.
Okay, I want to go back to the rabbit.
Okay.
Because I want your golden nuggets. I am excited to hear what your observations after almost 3 decades of watching stocks and participating in it full time for 6-7 years, and then part time after that, of the people that's kind of fire and forget versus the people who are well entrenched in the market and completely understand it. What are your golden rules or observations, etc., for everybody in the middle? Like those that don't want to, they want to buy individual stocks rather than something that tracks the market, but they don't have the time and energy to get deep into a market to be able to know and therefore understand and buy well.
I always like to start out when I'm having a conversation with someone about stock market investing. I'll ask them the question, what have you been doing? Where is your level of interest? Right. If I was to look at your feed on your phone and social media, how many of those, how many of the topics are finance related? Because, we live in this world of algorithms, and you look at one thing and all of a sudden you have 10 different promotions, 10 related topics coming up because you looked at this one. Yeah. So, so I just ask someone, be honest. Are you interested in the world of finance? Are you interested in how companies perform and how you can profit off of that? Or is this kind of over your head and you don't really have any interest in learning? because when you take that person and they haven't shown any real interest, if someone like me, if I'm in a promotional capacity and for whatever reason, if I was still a stockbroker and I was trying to get them to invest with me, or at least become interested in investing, then I'm not talking to someone who's a good candidate for that to be an active investor.
Right.
I am possibly talking to someone who, again, do a set it and forget it strategy, buy a large cap mutual fund, do dollar cost averaging for years and years and years. That's a no lose situation.
Yeah.
But between that and someone who's a super active day trader, then there's that huge spread.
So you'd actually recommend they go to one side or the other. If you're not very interested in it, then just go to buy and forget.
I'm a big believer. Tell me what kind of investing have you done? Maybe it's just been certificates of deposit.
Yeah.
Okay. You can there's a marketplace for those. It's not just through banks. There are banks in the United States. You can look at those same products in other areas of the world, believe it or not.
You could do. I heard somebody was doing very well in Iran. They were a Persian. And this is a decade ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So in other words, I always like to, my first nugget really is take what you know and expand that.
Okay.
And maybe solidify that.
So really knowledge.
Yeah. And because if that person doesn't have any level of comfort with individual stocks, they just hate the idea, but they're okay with a certificate of deposit or finding the best money market yields, which is the next closest thing to putting your money into a cash account, then let's stay in that area. And then maybe from that area, if you want to get a little better return, let's look at doing treasury bonds.
Mm-hmm.
If you get comfortable in those, maybe let's look at corporate bonds. So maybe we're sneaking into doing stocks.
Okay. So once you enter into the stocks, where do you enter in at? Or it's just broad and depends on the person?
It just really depends on the person.
So what's that same entry into real estate? As you mentioned before, first step would be buy your own home. From there, move homes and keep that one as a rental. What would you say is after that, in your opinion?
Yeah. After that would be, if it's been a couple of years and it's going well with their first home converted to a rental, and maybe their current home, they're not looking to upgrade anymore, and maybe they found another opportunity. Maybe they wanted to buy a duplex. Maybe someone said, "Hey, there's a condo in my area that's coming up for sale." And I'm not saying you should buy a condo. I'm just saying that they're typically at the lower end of the price range. More people would, might assume that it's going to be easier to get in.
Right.
But I've had a couple of clients over the years that they didn't even own their own house as a private, their personal residence. They went directly in to buying a rental property. I helped a young gal last year. She bought her first home as a duplex, and she lived in one side and, of course, rented out the other. The duplex came with tenants on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
That was a little bit of an issue because we had to require
for one of the
tenants to vacate.
Yes.
We ended up, I should say my client, and we forced the seller to hire an attorney to prepare and deliver the eviction letter. And we gave it a certain period of time. And it all worked out for my client. But boy, it would have been nice if we would have put an offer on a property that had one of the units vacant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Boy, that would have been nice.
And you're saying that because as a lender, you're lending on an owner-occupied property, albeit a duplex.
That was a owner-occupied.
And it would have been mortgage fraud if she had let the two tenants continue to live there because she's getting an owner-occupied loan, not
Yeah, and we did FHA,
Investor.
and
Mhm.
FHA will do an investment property such as this, but you have to be able to occupy one of the units within 60 days from the close of escrow.
Correct.
Right.
And
You don't want a 6-month eviction, is what you're saying.
yeah, and that was a challenge.
And FHA does do final inspections later on down the road. They actually go out and inspect the property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can do fourplexes with FHA as well, right?
Mhm.
Anything residential?
Anything residential.
Okay.
Yep.
So here's a question. When you're looking at stocks and you're looking at real estate, you know, when people invest, they look at retirement. Now, I want to retire. I want this kind of cash flow. You know, I want this to subsidize my retirement. How does that work between the stock market and real estate? Because real estate has passive income constantly. And then stock, how do you use that to support your lifestyle when you do say, I'm going to retire? Do you sell it off? Is there dividends in there? How do you
Yes and
survive?
yes.
Yeah.
I personally, myself, since I am approaching retirement, retirement age, I turned 63 a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And so I am thinking very much with the end in mind, mm-hmm. because so my personal belief is you get anywhere, you can aim for dividend paying stocks at any age. You don't have to be elderly or approaching retirement, right. But it becomes more as you're entering the years where the income source from employment is probably going to be drying up, especially if you're a W-2 wage worker. Then you're unless you're a gig employee or gig worker.
What's a gig worker?
Uber, DoorDash.
Oh,
yeah. Unless you're in that area, which a lot of people are. That's why we don't see the unemployment claim shooting through the roof. That's a story for another time. But I personally have been really focused on the last year on income producing investments. So dividend paying stocks is always what comes top of mind. There is a newer category of ETFs, which stands for exchange traded funds, mm-hmm. mutual funds that trade through the stock market rather than through a mutual fund company one time a day. And there's a particular area within the ETF category that is really focusing on what I would call super high yield. They're using covered calls, which when you sell a covered call, you receive a premium. Mm-hmm. Topic for another time if we want to talk about selling calls. But the purpose why I'm telling you this is because those premiums, think of that as the dividend that you're collecting. And they pay a dividend ratio. They always look at the dividend is the value of the dividend declared on an annual basis is divided by the price of the underlying stock. And a typical good dividend, strong dividend, might be 6%, 8%, 10%. Sometimes you can go a little higher than that. Mm. On these covered call ETFs, those ratios are in the 8% to 50 or 75 and even higher % as a ratio of the current dividend yield divided by the price of the ETF itself, the stock price.
Right.
And so when I started learning about these about a year ago, I became fascinated with. Mm-hmm.
Are you doing any of them? Mm-hmm. Have they performed well?
Sort of. Yeah, I say sort of because if you use the qualifier or the expectation that a stock that pays a dividend, you want the highest level of return, mm-hmm. but you want the lowest level of risk.
Right.
And when it comes to risk, what is the risk? Two forms of risk when it comes to owning a stock that pays a dividend. Will the dividend be maintained? Will they keep paying the same amount?
Right.
And will the stock price maintain itself?
Right.
There's underlying issues with these ETFs where the stock price doesn't hold up very well. So you got to look at the total return. How did the amount that you received, and and you also have to, you have to factor in how did the value of the underlying stock or ETF, how did that change over a year? And so that's the total return when you look at what did it pay versus how did the stock actually,
right.
Yeah.
So how do you do a comparison from the stock to real estate to retirement? Now, and I'm speaking for the average person. Now, what you're talking about is more high level, complicated. You really have to know what you're doing in the stock market to get into that circle. Your average person doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't understand it and has no desire to understand it. So you owning real estate and being involved with the stock, between the two, what would be the best vehicle for novice investors to set up a retirement for their future? Because you're going through it now. So my vision or my impression of what you're doing is you're modifying your stock portfolio to do what you're expecting to do. Whereas before, it wasn't going to be a retirement, but you have to modify it. Real estate, we have to do sometimes the similar thing, but my view of real estate is pretty more consistent because you have that constant passive income that doesn't waver very much. Pretty consistent. So you owning both, what is, you think, the best vehicle for your average everyday?
Yeah, if we're talking average as someone who really doesn't want to expose themselves more to the stock market and they don't have a natural desire to really learn how to become a successful investor, then to me it's a easy black and white decision. If you're doing something with stocks, most people have some type of retirement plan, an employer plan, and employers allow you to generally keep your plan with them even if you left the workplace. And so as most people, as they get closer to retirement, they will look at hiring financial advisors if they've saved up a respectable amount of money. And then hopefully their financial advisor is fluent and comfortable with their clients having real estate. But
so let me ask you another question. What would you tell your 30-year-old self? What you know today? What would you tell that person, you, when you were 30, with the current knowledge that you have today?
oh my gosh.
Buy Apple.
Apple was around then. Yeah. Are we talking like the sports almanac, from Back to the Future? And because I'm thinking, ooh, this could be really fun. This could be really fun.
And the reason why I ask this question is we have viewers that are going to be in that age group. And some that's going to be in the 40s, some in the 50s. So knowing what we all know today, I mean, I'm a lot more knowledgeable today than when I was at 20, 25 to 30. So you having both types of portfolios, what would you tell yourself?
I would say, well, again, this is for myself. 30 years ago, I had converted a home to a rental. So yeah, go along with what your wife says about buying other homes. It'll be okay. And yeah, when it comes to the stock market, I don't honestly know if I'd do anything different.
Right. So then what would be your advice? What would be your advice to 30-year-old me?
Yeah.
Because you
take your level of comfort,
right,
and do work, make yourself the best person you could be, the most knowledgeable person you can be when it comes to real estate.
Okay.
And if you have a level of comfort in the stock market, do the same thing.
Well, at 30, I didn't have comfort with either of them. And so, I mean, immediately what comes to mind is go get more knowledge. That is, learn more so you know more about it. So then you'll feel comfortable. Then you'll know what you feel comfortable with because you're exposed to different things. So from an active plan, like, hey, either get lots of knowledge in stocks or follow this path. I mean, what would you tell 30-year-old me that didn't know anything about either side? Like, what would be your general guidelines of going forward? You're going to get to your 60s, 70s, 80s. Here's the kind of the golden nugget to get from here to there and almost guaranteed to be successful.
Probably get past your fear, because everybody has reservations about doing everything. I mean, I look at buying your first real estate equal to getting married for the first time and bungee jumping. You just don't know how it's going to work out, right? So you just have to get past that fear and take that leap of faith and have the confidence in yourself. I was talking with somebody, or I saw something the other day, and they were talking about starting a business. The response came back from a very prominent business owner. He says, find the expert who is in your business and use them as your mentor. And they will get you through the process and the fear. Same with anything. If you're going to be involved in the stock market, find somebody who is involved in it and use them as your mentor. Real estate, use them as a mentor. Find a mentor, someone that can get you through the process and be able to take that first leap of faith and go for it. You were fortunate, you were kind of thrown into it, but you did convert your personal residence to a rental, probably not knowing you were doing that exactly as an investor. It just made sense at the time. Me, I picked up a book in 1979 and I read it. It was Buy Houses, No Money Down. And I understood it. I was reading it and it made tremendous sense to me. So I was petrified to buy my first rental. So I went out and I called my best friend. And I said, best friend, I need $2,500 from you. And I had $2,500 and we went out and bought a rental. I managed it, did everything, and ran the whole thing. He just had to prepare the taxes for us at the time because he worked for Price Waterhouse. So I took the leap, petrified, scared to death, and never looked back. Because once you do something and you get that fear over with, the next time you jump that ledge, you kind of know what you're headed for. You know you got the parachute, or you know the bungee cord's going to recoil you back up.
Yeah. So finding a friend, preferably someone that, maybe you grew up with or you met in high school or college. I think that's probably the main reason.
Choose your partner as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And arguably, I might say business partners might be even more important than spouses.
Yes, I agree.
Share more.
Well, no, just
your observations, because I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, well, because when I got hired at Stanford Mortgage, the guy hiring me, I found out shortly thereafter he was already owned several commercial properties with one of the other loan officers, and I saw these guys over the years just acquire more and more properties, and it was always a joint decision, and they didn't always feel the same, but they managed, and they're still, I haven't We don't work together anymore. One of them's kind of left the field, but seeing them do their thing and acquiring more and more real estate. They own some pretty cool buildings in Loomis and Rockland, and I was just always admired the heck out of them. And I don't want to say that, getting a divorce is so much easier than divorcing your business partner, but in many cases, I'm sure you can make the argument it is. And so kind of from that reason,
there isn't so much garbage going on between a husband and a wife as it is between partners. There's just a level of balance between business partners and a relationship partner. This is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Well, a business partner, like you and I are business partners,
Yeah.
we get along way better. And we can have our arguments and disagreements, but we don't bring the other stuff into the relationship because we don't have that kind of relationship.
Yes.
Like your wife will, you go out and you say, I want to do this. Your wife is going to have an opinion that's at a whole different mindset and level than you and I would have an opinion about, because we're business.
Right.
We're going to look at business and make decisions that way. She's not with a relationship. There's other stuff that's brought into the conversation that shouldn't be, but it is.
Yes. No. But yeah, that's if I'm talking to someone about how to get started, I've got a couple websites I could refer someone, but I almost don't even feel like doing that because there's just such a wide array of sources of information. There's a couple, Jim Cramer, longtime CNBC analyst. He's written a handful of really good books. John Bogle, guy that started Vanguard.
His books are excellent.
But talk to someone who already maybe thinks a little bit like you, maybe has a similar life experience, and maybe similar financial
as
status.
Kind of a mentor, or
as a mentor. Yeah. So what Mike said about a mentor, that is.
So somebody that's relatable to you, like, I can understand this person. He has similar context to my life, and they're already where you want. Well, they're not necessarily where you want to be, but they're already pointed in the right direction that you want to go.
Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times I've had people where maybe it was a decision to refinance.
Yeah.
And I talked to them, and I brought up the topic, and they didn't bite on it. Then I hear a month or a couple weeks later, or whatever, shortly down the road, they talk to their uncle or someone, their nephew, and all of a sudden, let's do that.
Right.
What happened? What happened? Oh, they said I'm being stupid. And I'm like,
I should have told you that.
Okay.
That's we need to change our communication. You are being stupid.
Yeah. And I've learned that the older I get, the more I just want to share. I don't care if I get a loan out of our conversation.
Yeah.
If I can help someone, if I can fill a gap, a knowledge gap that's existed for decades, and I filled it, I helped them with something that had been an issue, then that means a lot to me. That's kind of what I live for. And I think that's just kind of human behavior.
Sure.
That's good human behavior.
Yeah, yes. Good human behavior.
There's bad human behavior too.
Yeah, there's
you sleep at night too.
There's some of that too.
Okay, so let's talk about the tortoise for a bit. I would love to hear kind of your overview of having worked for decades with investment property. Like, what are your thoughts on investment property as investments specifically?
You have to, and again, and I'm gonna go back to, we did a presentation a while ago, and I did this one slide where I compared an investment property that my wife bought and sold, bought in 2013, sold in 2021. And I compared that to how that investment, what the return on investment was compared to an S&P 500 investment.
Right.
And
at the index. Right?
Yeah, comparing
how the
that.
index did relative over that.
And the reason why I'm mentioning this, Joel, is because in doing this comparison, I confirmed something that even though I knew in the back of my head, it forced me to bring it to the front of the head. And that was quantifying the the real estate investment advantages compared to even though you can borrow to buy stocks, but it's going on margin is something I would never tell anyone to do unless they'd already been doing it. But this comparison forced me to quantify the advantages that real estate has. And it was quite remarkable. The overall, looking at the fact that the price of the home doubled during the same period where the S&P 500 tripled. So right off the bat, you might go, well, God, the stock market did way better.
Right.
But but to go to the very end of the comparison, the net return of the S&P 500 investment was about 133% compared to 335% investing in the real estate, this particular.
And that's because of leverage?
And
debt reduction?
That is the big catalyst by far is the leverage. And because we put up $65,000 and we turned that into, when it was all said and done, after taxes, we turned it into a little over 200,000 profit.
Wow.
Okay. After we paid full taxes, we paid capital gains taxes on it.
Right.
So yeah. And of course, with the stock market, you're not exchanging that into, there are mutual fund exchanges, but that's a whole other story. But with stocks,
you're talking about,
you can't.
At the stock market, you can't exchange, and you did not do an exchange.
And we did not do an exchange.
So you had like-to-like.
So it was a like-to-like comparison.
That is, you pay taxes at the end.
Yeah, and the biggest, even though you got the depreciation, you got the other write-offs, you got to collect rent.
Were all those factored in? I mean, the depreciation is
absolutely
protecting the income that you received.
Absolutely. Okay. But then I compared it to, what if we didn't use a loan? What if we put up the $209,000 in cash rather than we put down 25%?
And how did that turn out?
That the 336% return would have dropped to 76%.
Okay. Oh. So then the stock market would have outperformed.
Then the stock market outperformed so that, of course, bolsters my opinion. If I'm talking to someone, if you're going to buy real estate, why should you use leverage?
Right there.
Again, if you're not, there are some people, they're not comfortable with debt whatsoever. And there's many people, you will not talk them into utilizing debt unless they talk to a family member that says, you're being stupid, go back to Jeff and finish your loan application. And so, but the tortoise is, we had to visit the home a few times. It cost a lot to sell it. Yeah. But you kind of knew what you were getting from the beginning. You had a reasonable expectation with what you were going to make off this property. And, you're meeting with your tax person and you're learning about your write-offs and you can't say the same with a stock portfolio unless you're super broad-based and you're doing those regular contributions. If you're doing anything else, then so again, real estate it's that tortoise. it just keeps chugging along.
Yeah.
And
Now, one thing to bring up, you had to go out to the property, you had to do any repairs over that time. You have more involvement in that than you did the stocks, than you do stocks.
yes,
If you bought stocks, you could have just bought them, forgotten about them, 8 years later, sign the document, sell them, and get paid. But with real estate, you have the whole process of getting a loan. You have the process of the purchase, all the fees, isolating what property to buy, finding the property, managing it yourself, or finding a property manager, finding the tenant. You guys manage yourselves, right?
We were
the property
the
manager.
managers.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then you got the full experience.
Yeah, I did the qualifying, and it's nice qualifying a tenant for your home. You don't have to have them meet qualifications as if they were buying the house.
Right.
And you actually don't want them to meet the qualifications for buying a house,
Mm-hmm.
or else they may be buying a house and not becoming your tenant.
Right. How many
That's
tenants did you have over that 8-year period?
I want to say 4.
Okay, so about one every 2 years.
Yeah.
And then how many? What was the transitions? I mean, Folsom's a nice area. So how long were the transitions between tenants, and how much work did you have to do on the property between tenants?
We had a wooden overhang that needed to be replaced. We had to fix a portion of the fence. The most interesting transition was we had a lady who worked for Bank of America, had a marketing position, and she took it upon herself to grow cannabis.
Oh.
And
so she had a second income.
She had a second income, and if it wasn't for the fact that one of the neighbors, because she had her plants on the outside, one of the neighbors alerted us to that happening, and then we had to set up a meeting with the city of Elk Grove and some inspector.
It was a Folsom or Elk Grove?
This was Elk Grove.
Okay.
Yeah. One in Folsom's been fine.
Okay.
We have a little old lady that's been there for many years now. But yeah, that was an interesting, we got to learn what kind of safety conditions could be in jeopardy.
What the rules and the liability of the landlord would be.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then in qualifying her, she didn't give us everything we typically ask for with a full bank statement, all pages.
Mm-hmm.
She only gave us portions, and couple things didn't quite add up, but we really liked her as a person because we meet everyone.
Right.
I can't express that point too much. You need to meet your tenants if at all possible.
Okay.
You need to physically interview them, and we did that with her. And but she just kind of took it upon herself to and.
Now, was this full grow house, or was this just a little patch in the backyard?
She had maybe the equivalent of 4 8-foot-long planter boxes.
Oh, okay. So it was that type.
With plants. Yeah, so she might have had a dozen plants.
That exceeded the guidelines for
4 plants.
4 plants, didn't it?
Yeah. And you're supposed to tell your landlords if you're going to do things like this.
So did you finally have to evict her, or
we learned upon the inspection she had let herself out when we told her that.
Oh, she did. She moved on.
Yeah, when we started to inquire, she moved really quickly.
Did she move her plants with her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
she left lots of topsoil, sure. Mounds and mounds of topsoil in the yard, and
great for carrots and tomatoes for the next.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So basically, the moral of the story is, even though you meet them, you're not always going to end Now, here in California, managing your own property, I advise everybody, do not manage your own real estate in the state of California right now. Too much liability, too much paperwork, and they're forever changing things. And you could get yourself really tied up in the courts because the tenants have a lot more rights than the landlords. That's just my opinion. So are you still managing your own real estate, or are you using a management company or something?
We have had the luxury. We have a property manager for the Bay Area properties, and she has, and we will use her advice on our other properties.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you use her as your mentor for all your local properties.
Yes. She's also a real estate agent, and she thinks like an attorney.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
And yeah, she's become, I don't want to say a member of the family, but she's kind of, she's pretty close. Yeah. Her name is Amanda. She's in the Livermore area, and I cannot say enough great things about Amanda.
今と子供の時と
Welcome back. We experienced some technical difficulties, so we will now continue the conversation. Jeff.
Hey. Nice to be here again.
We appreciate you coming back. We covered some really cool stuff, and I'm excited to cover it again, because maybe I'll learn it better. We're talking about DSTs. So we were just talking, you were saying, well, maybe it's not that big an avenue that people can choose. I like it because it is an avenue that people can choose.
Let's tell them what DST represents. Sorry. It's Delaware Statutory Trusts. It is a vehicle that you can 1031 exchange into, and it's mostly commercial, and you're within a group of people that invest as a pool.
Yes. So as opposed to it being stock oriented, that is, you don't have to take it out of the arena of real estate. You can 1031 exchange. It's still considered part of the real estate exchangeable world, as opposed to like.
Well, it is a real estate product.
Yeah,
inside
stocks and things like that. So, but I am very fascinated by it because I think it's a great way for people who have capital or want to do exchanges, but are towards the retirement end of life, don't want to deal with tenants, trashes, turds, and stuff like that.
Toilets. Yeah.
Exactly.
3 T's, toilet, tenants, and trash.
Yeah. That's it. Added the other one.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
the 4 T's?
The 4 T's.
Yeah. As mentioned last time, talking about DSTs, my wife and I completed a DST about a year ago. Mm-hmm. My wife and her sister inherited some properties in the Bay Area, and one particular property was one that we had some upcoming enormous costs that the city of Livermore was going to invoke, and we kind of took that as an opportunity to sell and do the exchange, and it was one where we didn't want to deal with any toilets and tenants.
Yeah. So what were the reasons precisely that caused you to choose a DST as opposed to another property?
Yeah, really the hands-off element.
Yeah, no management. No.
Yeah, we still have a few properties where we are the property managers, mm-hmm. And we have a great property manager in the Bay Area. But again, it was actually her suggestion. She's the one that suggested we look at the DST, and having met with Jana Reyes and a guy named Matt, who was our agent facilitating the exchange when the home was being sold last year.
Right.
When Matt met with us, he wanted to know what our return was on the home, and then he looked for products that would similarly match the return.
or
And-
exceed.
or exceed the
So,
return.
Yeah, run me through the numbers, because I remember I was actually surprised that because what I've seen historically is that they would be about equal, the returns would be about equal, but when you are in a DST, you give up a couple of things. You give up freedom, which is you can't change out of it. It's not easy to sell out of it. You go through the term of the DST, and then they sell it, and then you can get your money back or do another exchange, roll it into another property, etc. But you don't have any of that kind of power to choose the tenant, to evict the tenant, to make changes on the property. Basically, you leave all of that to somebody else.
Correct.
And that's the purpose of it. That's the benefit of it, is that you're not taking any of that responsibility or that control. You're giving up that control for consistent cash flow.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, the basic process is at the time that we are needing to perform the exchange, because after the sale of the property is complete, then you have 45 days to identify a replacement property.
Right.
We had already been meeting with Matt prior to this, so that wasn't a problem. We had a couple different options already identified. But what is happening from a kind of a high level perspective is you're taking a piece of residential property that we directly managed, and we're exchanging it into some type of commercial venture that another entity is managing, and they are the ones collecting rent. One of our exchanges went to a FedEx facility.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was a FedEx warehouse, a PepsiCo warehouse, and a senior facility. And so those entities then are collecting the rents from those tenants, mm-hmm. and then paying out our pro rata share to us. And at the time we did it, there was a number of other people that were also the investors into these new, what we called sponsors. And then so from there on out, we just collect the income. Mm-hmm. But we're also given an estimated holding time frame. And it can be anywhere between 3 and 7 years, 8 years. And it's a projection.
Depending on what happens.
Depending on what happens. Yeah. The whole idea is that you're exchanging your property for this commercial venture that you are
a percentage owner.
Basically. Yeah. Percentage owner, essentially. Yeah. And with the hopes that in a short period of time, maybe meaning 4, 5, 6 years, that it's going to be sold. And then we'd be given the opportunity to either roll it into a new DST sponsor or exchange it back into real estate, mm-hmm. or take the capital gains and move on, right. And call it quits. So,
now, what were the returns from your property, the difference in returns from the Bay Area property to your DSTs?
So for the DSTs that go into real estate, which is what we did, they're in the 4, 5, maybe 6% range. Mm-hmm. You can also do DSTs into like limited partnerships that might have oil and gas as the exchange instrument. And those...
Yeah, rabbit hole. Can you exchange into a limited partnership? or?
I'm using the term loosely. Okay. But we were informed that there were other options, such as oil and gas arrangements, where the returns would be more than double. That might be close to the 2-digit returns.
Right.
But they're much more erratic. And
so what you're saying is they could produce 12% one year and 4%
could do
the next year.
Yeah. And when you're at the time of your life and with a real estate investment, the idea of going into something that seemed a little erratic didn't
high risk than the low risk.
Didn't sit well. Yeah. So that's kind of the DST process.
And how are they working out, though?
As mentioned before, one of our sponsors did not go well. And in doing a little research, we found that is highly unusual.
Mhm.
But yeah, one of the sponsors has already filed for bankruptcy. And so we're learning how that process is going to work. And when you get a bunch of attorneys into the mix that weren't there before, that are all going to want to collect, and it's sometime this year we'll find out how well we fared.
So the good news is you diversified the sale of that property into 3 separate DSTs,
Yes.
which was a wise move rather than putting it all into one.
Yes. And in general, when you invest, we all hear you should diversify.
Correct.
And especially in the DST world, I can vouch that's a great idea. that will save your bacon.
2 out of 3 that's working.
Yeah. And
Right.
we did do it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Okay.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And it's not likely, because it's real estate, it's not likely to lose all of your principal because you own part of the value of the asset. The asset hasn't lost in value. In fact, the asset, as you were explaining before, is performing quite well. But the sponsor has a variety of other assets that are not performing well, and therefore has filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So it's not that this property is individually the problem, but it's the sponsor under which this property is run.
That is correct.
So,
That is correct.
and the other 2 are doing great.
Yeah, the other 2 are just fine. We're getting our payments, and also just I'm a let's go down a rabbit hole for a little bit kind of person. The exchange we made did come with a sizable gain. So the loss that we're probably going to be taking with this one particular sponsor, when it nets out, it may not be a loss at all. So
you're talking from tax purposes.
From tax purposes,
because you had the property, and if you sold it and cashed out, you'd have a sizable gain that you'd be paying taxes on.
Yeah, the property that was inherited around 2012, which is kind of the low point for property values.
Oh yeah, so you rode the market up.
Yeah, so since there's a sizable gain in it, a loss of whatever it's going to be probably will still net out to be a little bit of a gain. It's if we're putting on our bean counter hat.
Yeah, no, well, and that's only if you realize the gain.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know anything about DSTs.
We may be forced to with a bankruptcy.
Right. Well, if it's forced to sell, I mean, it could be some sort of workout, or it could be. It seems like there could be a workout, or it could be that somebody else purchases the assets, somebody else becomes the sponsor and runs it, and therefore there'd be no change of ownership. So it would just go back to performing again.
It's a possibility.
That's a possibility.
I'm interested to find out.
It's a possibility. I will let both of you know when that happens. Hopefully, it's sometime this year.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to get education as the income from your efforts.
Outside of a bankruptcy, the typical downside with a DST is the illiquidity.
Yeah.
If you change your mind that you don't want, as one of the owners, you don't want to be involved in this investment, then I've heard there's a possibility the board of directors, they have to find someone else that wants to take over your share. And I've heard that's a small possibility.
Yeah.
But I've also heard a number of times, don't count on that.
Yes.
You're writing this to
Is there any kind of secondary market for DSTs?
Well, usually my understanding is it's the members have already bought into it. They may want to add more. So, if there's like 15, 20 people involved into one DST, those people may want to take over the position, but they're not going to pay full boat for it. It's going to be a discounted.
One would hope.
Yeah, it'll be discounted because I wouldn't buy somebody else's shares at full price. I'd throw a ridiculous offer out there and see how desperate they are to get out. So,
right. Another thing we discussed was any final thoughts on the DST?
I think we kind of
Yeah, I
covered
think
that.
they're great for people who want the money to remain in real estate, don't want to pay the tax for the cash out, and just right there can save it, quite a bit.
It's not for
Just
everybody
maintain it.
though, but it is a
Maintain
good
the
tool.
returns, yeah.
It is a good tool, but not for everybody.
Short-term rentals. We've talked a few times over the
Yep.
years. I want to hear your thoughts after, how long have you owned short-term rentals? 10, 15 years?
Yeah, we got our first one in 2011.
Okay. 15 years.
And yeah, and
What's your wisdom after 15 years of short-term rentals?
you need to be real estate investing, and becoming your own property manager has to be something would be very helpful if you're passionate about it.
Very proactive.
Very proactive. If you want to hire a property management company to do short-term rentals, or did we haven't gone that route yet,
Yeah.
but you might be giving up roughly half of your income,
40 to 50%.
30, 40% of your income. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So how do you get around that? You are your own manager. You deal with the guests that want to rent from you for typically as a weekend, arrive on a Friday, leave on a Sunday, and you need to have some type of a house cleaner. You need to have a handyman. If it's not you and you don't live close by, then you absolutely have to have these kind of services involved, and helps to have cameras and watch who's showing up. And but yeah, it's not for the weak of heart. It's not a set it and forget it plan. You're going to learn a lot about people in a short period of time and their habits. But if you're someone that fancies yourself as maybe running a bed and breakfast, well, this is a great segue into that. And
so like a low scale bed and breakfast.
Low scale bed and breakfast. Yeah. And it's also one where if you have a mortgage that secured that property, so you need to service a mortgage in addition to, because you're paying for all the utilities, and you could have guests that don't turn the power off, leave a dishwasher running. There might be accidents. Keep the thermostat too high or too low, and you have to factor in all these.
You have to Bluetooth everything.
Yes, you have to hope that the energy stays
the
on.
Locks, Bluetooth the thermostat, Bluetooth the oven. I my refrigerator Bluetooths.
Well, now you can do that.
And yeah,
They tell you when you need milk.
No, but I got to tell you this real quick story. It's my Tennessee house, and my granddaughter went over there, and so she went to check the mail, make sure everything was good, and all of a sudden my phone starts beeping. The refrigerator door was left ajar. Well, she had gone in there to get a bottle of water and didn't close the door all the way. Well, if she left and the door was left partly open, that wouldn't have been a good thing, right? So the refrigerator notified me that the door had been left ajar. So I just called her. Said, refrigerator just went off. So I went and closed it. So, I mean, you can Bluetooth it. Even my stove oven there you can Bluetooth.
Wow.
It's just amazing.
Bluetooth the lights you can do.
Oh yeah, Bluetooth lights, and I mean these smart houses. It's just
it's pretty
hilarious.
amazing.
Yeah.
I gotta say, having done the short-term rentals for roughly 15 years, hindsight being 2020, having full-time tenants that hopefully pay you rent the same amount every month, that can absorb a good portion of the utilities costs, we probably would have did a lot better.
Yeah.
Really?
But here's the thing. If you get a vacation rental in a place that you want to stay, okay, you can't
go there.
You can't go there if you have a full-time tenant. You have you have this ability to rent your own house at any time, and that's a nice thing to have happen. That's part of your quality of life that you just
So that's a
built in.
trade-off that you
Yeah.
can calculate. It's not an income, but it's a luxury.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, think of a short-term rental as a second home on steroids. And second homes are supposed to be for your own quiet enjoyment from a lending perspective.
Right.
In the real world, you can do what you want with the second home. You can collect rental income. And but these cover both sides of that. So
with regard to second homes, do you pay the same mortgage pricing as you do for an investment property?
Up until 2022, the answer would have been no. After 2022, the agencies that regulate us, Fannie and Freddie, they worsened what we call the loan limit price adjustments. And unless you have a 40% down payment or more, you're going to get the same mortgage terms on a second home that you do on a rental property.
Okay.
And of course, with the rental property, you get to use offsetting income for qualifying. A second home, you never get to do that. So there's been a number of times.
So it's a worse loan than an investment property.
Yeah, it's kind of a worse loan, and you might as well switch it.
Just switch it to an investment property.
Just go.
Use it as a second home.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some good news to share.
There we go.
For the real estate world.
You said at our last conversation, you were talking about VRBO and Airbnb, that there had been some constraints that they were implementing, or they wanted to run their business for their clients in a way that wasn't necessarily conducive to the way you wanted to run your business.
So basically, you lost a level of control.
Gosh, I cannot. If there was an alternative other than, maybe using constant contact, which is kind of progressive when it comes to email campaigns. And those two entities have the lion's share of the marketing traffic for people that want to find what's called an Airbnb. But those two entities basically treat all the mom and pops that have short-term rentals in this country as if we're all large hotels, and as if we're not going to have filters on the conditions upon which we rent. There's a big difference between renting to a couple that just want to have a quiet weekend versus a bachelor party that wants to invite everyone over, and there might be 50 people coming through the house. A huge difference. As the homeowner, you need to know about that. And
so, have you had that happen? where they say we're 2 people and all of a sudden there's 50?
Yeah, we've had 2 or 4 turn into 7 or 8. We had one where there was some shenanigans, I'll phrase it that way, going on that weren't there was nothing moral about what was going on in our house that weekend. And as a result of that, we actually...
You raised your cleaning deposit?
Yeah. We had cameras installed because shortly before that, we think we had someone that was renting from us that came back and then re-entered the house, and they went through
and you're talking cameras exterior, not interior.
Interior is.
But you can see who's coming and going from the exterior.
Yeah, we can. Primarily we want to see what are the number of cars. If it was supposed to be 2 people coming in 1 car, why is there 3 cars? Right. And we have a no smoking policy, so it's not uncommon to see people smoking. And if we learn that they do want to smoke, then we ask them, go down the street. Murphy's is a high fire danger, and we butt up next to the forest there. So my wife is no nonsense. She makes it very, very apparent some of our personal rules.
Yeah. How do you manage that with Airbnb, VRBO? That is your own constraints. Do you deselect people who want to select, or
We have essentially our own unique contract within this process. And we require anyone that rents from us to sign this contract.
Okay.
So think of it as just a basic 3 or 4 page rental agreement.
So they can just back out if it's not going to suit their needs for the weekend.
Yep. And
suits you fine.
we would love to have that happen, and in reality, does everyone read contracts?
No.
Especially, you're going to rent a home for a couple of days. What do you need to know?
Yeah.
And so, most people don't read, and my wife insists on having a phone conversation with everyone. And that is, information is not shared until after a booking is made. So
they're already booked before.
Yeah. So we run the issue of booking someone just to be able to communicate with them, only to find out that they don't. There's some issue with them, and maybe they have really young children, and we have stairs that are kind of precarious, and we don't want really young children, unless it's a baby, to go up the stairs. It's a safety hazard. And so, in addition to the smoking, but yeah, and then there's a rating system. How do they rank you?
Yeah.
And what is kind of cool more recently is that the rating system has gone 2 ways.
Oh, you can rate
We can rate our guests.
Oh, that's good.
That is huge, because now that it being a 2-way street, you want to kind of maybe all the guests don't feel like they have all the power to, and every now and then some of our things walk off to be more disruptive. Yeah.
So missing things periodically.
Missing, yeah.
Salt and pepper shaker.
Silverware, salt and pepper shaker. We will gain sometimes garments. Someone, leaves a sweater. Things like that have happened, and anything of any value, we'll contact the guests and
arrange to get it back,
and offer to ship it to them.
Yeah.
And so,
now, what about competition?
When we first started doing this, we were one of a handful of folks in the little town of Murphy's. Yeah, it seemed like 5 or 10.
Yeah.
And over the years, there's been more and more competition.
Yeah.
And
so it's somewhat saturated then.
Very saturated.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone ever comes to me for a loan looking for a short-term rental, then I, of course, will talk to them about,
checking the inventory, see what's out there.
Check the inventory.
We had done that. We were looking in one of our markets.
Yeah.
We thought, short-term rental. You pulled it up and it was like hundreds of them within a little circle. I'm exaggerating, but oh my word, it's a good thing we didn't.
Yeah, I calculated the numbers like, okay, if we rent it for this night, we'd have to have how many nights to be able to cover same thing as if we were renting month to month.
Yeah,
and
long term.
It was like you had to have 25 nights or something like that. And because there were so many that it had driven the price down to very little.
Yeah.
And then it didn't make any sense because you're covering all the hassle of having an Airbnb plus all the utilities and then all the unforeseens of having 10 tenants in a month. And then you have to get 10 tenants in a month.
One arrangement that I think is from a financial standpoint is very desirable is if you're living in residing in that home, and maybe the home has an ADU,
right,
or maybe it has a basement that you've renovated and has its own separate entrance,
and you don't mind cleaning up after people.
That too. And your guests don't mind that the homeowner or caretaker is on site upstairs next door.
On site, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they can choose. They can opt in or out. But I've thought about that. I thought, oh, we could build an ADU and somebody could stay here. And I'm like, but I don't want to deal with the tenant. Every couple of days you have a different tenant, and you're perennially changing somebody else's bed, cleaning somebody else's sink. I don't like cleaning my sink.
Yeah.
So
I probably wouldn't recommend, if you've never owned a rental property before, I wouldn't recommend starting with a short-term rental.
You got to wing your way into it.
Yeah.
Buy a rental long-term, put a tenant in it long-term, go through those hassles.
Yep. Baby steps with that before you take on the all the activities that will be involved.
Everybody has that get rich quick, make a lot of money in a short time. It's not what it's all cracked up to be.
Yeah.
It almost never is.
No. For me, I like the assured single family rental. Family stays there. They don't move out for years and years. Dishwasher goes out, you replace it. Hot water heater, you just replace it. You just take up the maintenance, and life's wonderful. That's my world. That's in fact, my landlord called on one of my properties and said, the stove I have a vacancy in my multifamily. Called today and said, the stove is really not in that good a shape. It's the coil thing, and where you plug in, the wires are exposed. It's kind of just falling apart. It's been there for a while. So I said, well, we can send a repair person over there. Just to go there at $75, and then they may or may not be able to fix it. So I said, so what's the replacement? Between 4 and 6. Replace it. $400 and $600. Brand new stove, range cooktop.
After you've done a couple of repairs, it's half the cost.
Yeah. So, and then it's nice because it's brand new, good tenant moving in, seeing something brand new. It just shows much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One less complaint from the tenant.
Exactly. Or I don't have to fix it again 6 months from now when it also fails again.
Yeah.
And then you got to coordinate the timing with the tenant, and they're upset because they can't cook.
Has to do.
Yeah, but then the tenant has to get upset because it's going to take 3 or 4 days to get it done. They can't cook their pot pies in the oven, fry their egg, whatever.
Another thing we discussed last time was the reverse exchanges. I'm sorry, the reverse, not exchanges.
Reverse mortgages. Yeah.
And I remember looking at them back in 05 and 06, and they were great. You couldn't get a better loan than a reverse mortgage. And then they went away for a few years, and when they came back, they were much more make sense from the lender perspective.
And very expensive.
Much less beneficial to the consumer.
Yeah, in 2008, we had some financial hiccups going on in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And around that time, Wells Fargo was the chief source for reverse mortgages in the country. I think they had originated over like 100,000 in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
We're nowhere near that. They got out of reverse mortgages. Bank of America got out of reverse mortgages. They got out of dealing with mortgage brokers. Wells was one of our big sources for sending a loan to.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided after 2008, they weren't going to do that business anymore.
Right.
The product itself, it was 2009 where the reverse for purchase possibility came around, meaning that someone can acquire a home, can purchase a home with a reverse mortgage to start owning that house with the reverse in place.
So how does that work?
And well, it's all the same terms, same rates, same fees involved as a refinance, because that's really where it really started, was to pay off a mortgage and then eliminate the payments and make any future payments. Just the homeowner could choose if they wanted to make a payment. You hear about reverse mortgages never have payments. Interest is still accruing, so you're just given the flexibility of whether you do want to make a payment or not, or
Right.
wait.
If you make a payment, then the interest is
Yeah.
paid. And if you don't make a payment, then the interest is paid by your equity. Whenever the mortgage is
Yes.
closed out, then
Yes.
it's paid.
Yes.
But when you are buying a house so I'm thinking you buy a $500,000 house and you have to, let's say you go in with cash, you buy it and it's yours at $500,000. Or a lot of people, they go in, they put 20% down. So that would be $100,000. And put $100,000 in and then they have $400,000 mortgage. How is buying with a reverse mortgage different than that?
Well, it's way different from the standpoint
Because you don't have the equity.
Yeah, we need to force the equity in with a very large down payment.
Okay.
Because that down payment needs to essentially service the upcoming interest that's going to accrue for the life expectancy of the youngest borrower. And so just to give you some numbers, let's say someone is 75 years old and they sold their 2-story home, they want to get a single story, and maybe they sold and they had, maybe a very small or no mortgage on their current home, and maybe they netted $600,000.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe they want to buy a $600,000 single family home.
Right.
Well, if they're in their mid 70s, then the down payment is going to be in the neighborhood of about 55% down. I could have made them 80 and said 50% down. Sorry. But to make the math a little nicer, but there needs to be, and HUD shows us essentially the algorithms for, based on whatever rate it is and the age of the borrower, then we're going to need this much starting equity.
Okay. So given that case, $600,000 home, they're 75, 55% is the amount of cash that they need to come into this property.
Yes.
And then the other 45% is paid by the reverse mortgage at purchase.
Yes.
And so that money's coming out from the reverse mortgage lender to the seller to pay them. And then the borrower's not making any payments, but essentially it's working into that, the interest is working into that 55%. So when they sell, they're not going to have more than 55% equity. They're going to have less than 55% equity.
But we also,
when they die.
we do projections. California, we typically get kind of good appreciation. And we use, and this is a nationwide figure, we use a 4% appreciation rate. So one of the most important forms to discuss with anyone looking at a reverse mortgage is what's called the amortization schedule and projection worksheet. So we show them what the equity is, that's on the far right-hand column, based on what the loan amount is going to be projected to be at the end of each year, what the home value is going to be projected at the end of each year, and then the equity is what's left over. And when you start out with the home value, that is generally 1.5 to 2 times the amount of the loan, even though the home value is going up 4% and maybe the interest rates are 6%, the homeowners should continue to gain equity over the first 10, 12 years. Then when you get a little bit beyond that, then that 6% interest rate starts to eat into that, and then the equity starts reducing.
Well, the 6% is also on about half the amount of the 4%.
Correct.
That is, it's
correct.
45% of the 600,000, or just under 300,000. 6%, but the 4% is on the total value of the property. So your 4% is going farther. At least in the near term. The market's going to go through cycles.
Yeah.
Now that loan is actually for a certain group of people, right?
Yes.
And the other question is, can that be done as a refi? So if you're already on
old people?
Old people, yeah.
Mature people?
I think it's 55 and older.
We have proprietary products that have come around in the past 5 or 6 years where 55 and over. otherwise, the standard reverse
It
mortgage
makes me feel old.
is 62 and over.
62.
I
Okay.
can now
Yeah.
qualify for a reverse
At
mortgage.
least if there's two borrowers, one of them has to be 62, the other could be younger.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I just want to clear that up because talking reverse mortgages is not available for everybody.
no.
And then already own a house. Can I put a reverse mortgage on a house that I already own and live in?
Yep.
Okay.
That's kind of the default also. The reverse for purchase is something that happens infrequently. I did one towards the end of last year, and it was almost a flawless process, which is really unique to say in the reverse world.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, we have there's some level of complications, and
Okay, so let's take that example of the reverse mortgage purchase and go to the refinance. So taking that same individual and the same property, 600,000, and the person is 75. What percent would you need to do? What percent of equity would you need in the property to do a reverse mortgage, pay that off, so that person doesn't need to pay monthly payments?
yeah. So maybe you have a scenario where someone did the all cash. Maybe they didn't they didn't want to deal with doing a reverse mortgage. They had the cash. They just wanted to buy the home outright. That was their plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come to someone like me after the fact. And so a refi is the most common type of reverse mortgage done. It has the exact same equity requirements based on age and the current level of interest rates as the purchase process. If you look into reverse mortgages from a high level perspective, one of the complaints is, oh, the fees are really high.
Mm-hmm.
Fees are really high.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. And since I also do conventional FHA mortgages, or what we call forward mortgages, the fees are only slightly less for a first-time home buyer than it is with a senior using the standard reverse mortgage. The difference is how the fees are displayed. When we do a reverse mortgage and we show them the closing costs, the biggest fee by far is an upfront mortgage insurance premium, and that premium is based on the value of the home, not the loan amount. And the value of the home is always going to be higher than the loan amount,
Of course,
especially on a reverse mortgage. So again, $700,000 home, this fee is equal to 2% of that. So you have a $14,000 upfront mortgage insurance premium. That, I call that fee the pay to play fee. If you want to play with a reverse mortgage and have the benefit of never having to make a payment during your lifetime, then you have to pony up that
This is what
money.
you pay?
Yeah. No, it's not out of pocket. It's financed.
It's financed.
It's financed. Yeah. There's really only one fee that can't be financed, and that's the counseling fee. By the way,
that's to get counseling too.
You have to pay to get counseling. Yeah, it's between.
It's a psychological.
I had a rough life.
Yeah. And HUD requires that anyone that meets with a loan officer about a reverse mortgage, before they can shove off and we can collect fees, they have to meet with an independent counselor. And generally, it's a phone call that might last an hour, hour and a half. And the purpose.
So how are you feeling in your life?
Yeah, they don't do that.
And what would be
Not
the
that
fee?
kind of counselor?
Yeah. What's the fee cost on something?
Maybe $175.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's not bad.
and there, believe it or not, that for a number of years there was actually stimulus funds to pay for that fee.
Oh.
So I tell everyone, ask if there's any stimulus funds to offset this, and many times the answer is yes. And
From the counselors?
from the the counselor got reimbursed from another entity where these stimulus funds existed. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay,
I
so
learned something.
it's 55% also for that 75-year-old, also for that same property, same as a purchase, but for the refinance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what that means is that money of the 45% is coming to pay off whatever loan there is, and if the loan is only at 30%, then you can walk away with 15% in cash in the bank.
Yeah. Yeah, you have the traditional regular reverse mortgage, what we call the HECM. It comes with a line of credit, so you can, kind of like a HELOC, but I call it a HELOC on steroids because a HELOC doesn't give you access to more money beyond whatever your max credit amount is.
Right. Exactly.
So it goes up as you.
A reverse mortgage has what's called a growth factor. So whatever interest rate you're incurring interest on from that loan, so if that's a 6% rate, the amount of money that's available that you haven't utilized is going to grow by 6% annually. And since most of these loans have an adjustable rate mortgage, it's going to move up and down a little bit, but that's currently kind of where things are at.
So another question, in order to get one of those loans, you have to qualify for them.
Mm-hmm.
So most of these
You have
people,
to go to your counselor.
well, yeah, after you did the counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these people, their only income is their Social Security, for example. How does that qualifying for a reverse mortgage, is it less income or better numbers than if I had a job and I was going to qualify just to purchase a house? Because there's different numbers there and percentages.
Yeah, the reverse mortgage qualification from an income standpoint is very straightforward. We're only concerned that you have enough income to service the housing obligations.
So that is taxes,
Property
insurance.
tax, insurance,
if there's
maintenance.
HOA dues.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so generally someone that has $1,000 a month in Social Security income, that's in most cases that's going to be enough income to service what the housing obligations are.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is no loan payment, so we don't have to,
you don't have to
service that like a traditional mortgage. We don't have to service if there's credit card debt.
Oh,
and
so that's not even part of it.
So there's some other ways that we deal with it. I don't want to go as far as saying,
Sure.
we're not concerned, but if there's enough available equity, then we can use that to effectively service the consumer debts. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, it was, by the way, reverse mortgages. Ronald Reagan signed into law in late 1987.
Oh,
the home equity conversion mortgage. The first one came around in 1961. A little old lady named Nellie Young in the East Coast got one, went to her local bank. Her deceased husband was the former local football coach, and the bank, she had a good relationship. And one of the bank managers took it upon himself to figure out a way to structure her equity into an income stream and help her make, created income from her that she had lost with her deceased husband. That was the first mortgage, that was our first reverse mortgage.
Wow.
So they've been around for over 60 years.
Cool.
But they're more modified and refined.
They're much more consumer friendly.
Yeah.
Borrower protections have been added that didn't exist before. And
I think the borrower protections are probably bank protections. That is, the borrower gets foreclosed on, or something else happens, and so the bank goes, we're going to create some more borrower protections so that we don't take the hit.
Yeah, one thing to point out that it's a big borrower protection. Old rules set the way it worked, where let's say we have a married couple, but one of them was not of age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we consider the younger homeowner as a non-borrowing spouse. So they're not on the note. They go on the deed, but they're not on the note. And prior to, I want to say it was also 2022, prior to that time, when that borrower passed away, that the spouse was going to need to vacate unless they could refinance. And if they couldn't refinance, then they
They call the loan
That would be a
payment.
consumer protection that they're not run out of the property, right?
Correct. Now that's flipped, and now that non-borrowing spouse has protections and is allowed to, in most cases, allowed to stay their remaining life expectancy. And so, yeah, there has been a lot of thought. Seniors are considered a protected class in this country. So when we hear
protected species,
protected species, yeah,
you're not dying, but you're not endangered, but
yes,
we're all dying.
Yeah, when I talk to someone and the first thing they say is, "Oh, you do reverse mortgages. Oh, aren't those designed to separate seniors in their homes?" And I have to shake my head.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of things.
Yeah,
it's very expensive. They're not good loans. They're negative amortized. You lose your equity, and then eventually there's nothing to give to the heirs, no legacy, all that. I've heard all that stuff. Yeah. And some of it is true, though. Some of it is true.
They are neg-am loans.
Yeah.
Because the fact that you don't
they just
have to
manage
make
them wrong, too.
Yeah.
Well, and the people that I've known that have got them, they didn't have another source of income. They're real estate agents.
Oh.
So retired real estate agents, and they had equity, but they didn't have cash flow.
So they used the reverse mortgage.
Right, they used a reverse mortgage on their
So they got an extra
properties.
couple grand a month or whatever it was.
Yep. So, and when I was looking at them 20 years ago, they were great mortgages. I mean, there wasn't a better mortgage out there. They would go up to 80%. You could live in them for as long as you wanted, till you died. And so I was like, man, I don't know how the banks keep this going, but after a while.
So can you do them in other states, or are you mostly California?
It can, even though I'm only licensed in California, I work with people that are licensed in other states.
And the cost is the same, pretty much.
Oh yeah, it's all that. That's the nice thing. The only difference would be if someone's shopping around, and they should shop around, the margins that we offer. That there could be a difference in going to two different lenders and being offered two different margins. And so if you're going to shop around.
When you say margin, do you mean cost to get the loan, or do you mean?
Margin is the profit
rate
that the lender receives when they do that loan.
Okay.
And margins start.
But does that reflect into the interest rate that the consumer receives?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So the lower the margin that you get, the slower your interest rate is going to compound, and the slower your compounding growth rate also. So it's a little bit of a two-way street, but overall you want to have the lowest margin, because then your loan amount is going to grow slower than.
What is the margin at today? Guesstimate.
Yeah, not 2%, 2.25%.
That's off of borrowed funds that the bank is using then to lend?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's part of the.
And the consumer understands it as an interest rate that they're going to pay.
That they're going to incur. Yeah. So, someone's going to pay for it eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is part of.
Right. Yeah, because they're going to incur because they're not paying on it. It's actually coming from their equity.
Right.
And
so technically,
it's a paper.
It's a 2.5% or 2.25% loan.
Well, that's the margin.
The margin, and then you have the interest. Then you have the interest on top.
Then you have the index. Yeah, the index,
and that floats.
That adjusts.
Adjustable.
Yeah, your margin, once we lock your loan at the end of the process, then that's never going to change. The underlying index. The Federal Reserve, what's one of the things they do? We all hear about. They adjust rates. Mm-hmm. When they cut rates, these underlying indexes, to a certain degree, it's never basis point for basis point, but to a certain degree, when they cut rates, these indice yields or values go lower. So that's been happening. And
what are the common indices that the banks are using?
The one we use and many other lenders use is called the CMT, the Constant Maturing Treasury. So it's treasury bills, and many financial instruments are.
a specific treasury bill, or is that a combination?
I think last time I saw, wasn't it like 4 point something, 4.1 or 3.9 or something?
You're thinking
like
of the 10-year treasury,
That's the 10-year.
which not too long ago, it went sub 4%. As of yesterday, it was hitting almost 4.5%. It's right around 4.4% now. But we use an index that is a hybrid of a treasury bill or a treasury bond called the constant maturing treasury. So it's like an average. And
what is that trading at right now?
And that level is about 3.7%.
Okay. So it adjusts once a year, every month?
We're bringing back the once a year, but other than that, the default instrument now is a monthly adjustment.
Right, but that's monthly adjustment on not on the CMT, but on the interest rate of
both.
Does CMT adjust monthly?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We can do a monthly CMT. We can do an annual CMT. Okay. And the annual was just brought back. If this was 5 or 6 years ago, and before that, we only had annual adjustments. And then when financial shenanigans started a number of years ago, we got away. Yeah, there used to be the LIBOR index. Remember the LIBOR? The LIBOR is dead.
Did that die because there were a couple of people that were gaming the LIBOR?
That's exactly why. There was some
rate.
There was some manipulation going on. I think
it killed it.
Yeah,
I know.
It was it's a UK product, but that it went throughout the world. Any financial product that had any adjustable component used the LIBOR index. And there was complaints about it for a long time. Finally, I want to say 2022-ish is where we finally segued out of the LIBOR. And the people that had existing reverse mortgages, they received a notification that their index was going to be replaced with either the CMT. There's another one.
I bet they got a lot of blank stares on that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is something, this has never happened in history. So the first time you get told that your index is being swapped out,
they panicked.
They don't know what to panic about.
Exactly.
They don't know what to panic about.
That's good.
And when it was all said and done, the actual yield, or what you think of as the interest rate associated, it was almost the same as the LIBOR. And then you get past one statement, one cycle period, and no one's going to remember.
Everybody gets comfortable with it.
You're not going to remember what it was and how you're doing.
The world didn't collapse, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So the CMT, is that the most commonly used, or what are the other indexes that are being used for these days?
There was another one that I thought was going to be our primary go-to index, the SOFR, Secured Overnight Finance Rate. And for whatever reason, when we got to the point to where we're finally getting away from the LIBOR, the CMT was the index of choice.
So what you're saying is CMD had better marketing power.
Evidently. By the way, this conversation we're having, I never have with anyone. Who wants to talk about,
indexes,
financial instruments?
Well, I think it's super interesting because the LIBOR was like everybody used the LIBOR. And then, it was only last year that I was talking to somebody and said, "What index are you using?" They go, "Well, it's this." And I went, "What's that?"
Yeah.
But I remember reading about the LIBOR. There were some financial guys that were
manipulating
by how they would, somehow they made money off of whether the LIBOR was going up or down. I didn't understand it, but they were able to, by the way that they did their trades and the amount of trades that they did, to manipulate it so there was a space. So they were always making money, even though it was minuscule amounts, but it's large amounts of money.
Sure.
And the crap hit the fan, and nobody, everyone's hair on fire. Nobody knows what to do, and the rest of the world, nobody cares. Like, okay, what's the deal?
Mhm.
Anyway, I thought it was really fascinating.
And we're talking about loosening banking restrictions on reserve requirements.
Tell me more.
Yeah, well, a whole other topic, but
It's okay. We like other topics.
yeah, our ability. Every
You mean the banks? You mean the lenders or
the borrowers?
No, the banks.
Okay.
The banks. Banking. There's a variety of banking regulations.
Yeah.
But one of the requirements for any FDIC insured bank, I knew I could say it, was that in general, with whatever assets you have and deposits, you need to maintain a certain amount of assets.
Right.
What is it,
reserve.
like 10% or something like that?
Yeah, it's in that. And then when you make different types of loans, you need to have a certain amount, again, in assets. And treasuries have not been looked at as something that could be utilized as a reserve asset until recently. They're wanting
Now,
to
when you
change
say
that.
treasuries, you mean like
Treasury.
holding 10-year bonds?
Exactly.
Well, that's what
Exactly.
got the San Jose and the San Francisco banks shut down. Is they didn't have liquidity because they couldn't sell their bonds. Well, their bond yields were too low, and then they couldn't sell them, and when the bonds adjusted.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that they're going to include the treasuries as part of their?
Yeah, they weren't doing that before, and now they're
requirements?
considering doing that. Yeah, when the topic of banks come up, unless you're kind of in the know or really interested in learning about this, most of us think of banks are generically the same. That
You know what that's just told me? That they're preparing and trying to avoid bank closures and banks going out. So if they have to adjust that into their financial statement, does that mean that the stress test on these banks is not good?
That I haven't heard, but since they're talking about
since they're talking
reducing requirements, the whole purpose of having that conversation really has to do with allowing banks to be a little bit more liquid.
It allows for liquiidity. If you go from 10% to 9%, you have that extra percent of
but they're using
billions of dollars.
I mean, they did that in the 2008 with all the REOs. They changed the rule. Now, you probably know a little bit more about that than me, but when a bank foreclosed on a property and they brought it in as an asset, it was moved over to a different department and wasn't a liability. It became an asset over in another section. So normally when you foreclose and you take a property back, it's a negative. I mean, it's now something that you got to deal with.
I think pre 2008, I think it was a liability.
It was.
I'm not the expert, but you brought it in. It was now a liability, not an asset on the banks.
Yeah.
And you also had to hold reserves equal to whatever the amount was.
And same with the defaulting loans and notes. They were able to spin those off and move them over to another category so it didn't become a negative asset. So that would also stop the banks from not qualifying and having to take them and shut them down. Am I thinking right? Because they just keep...
Tell us more, Jeff.
Manipulating.
You're kind of making my point in that banking can get very complicated.
Exactly right.
To say the least. But the premise of reducing reserve requirements is really meant to make lower interest rates, make buying a home more affordable. If you can have more banks participating, potentially lending out
more of their
funds,
money.
yeah, and if there's more loan products out there, then we create more competition, and that's generally good for the consumers. It
seems like a disguise.
Yeah, but
it's
I wonder if it's designed to allow for the banks, is if they can purchase the treasuries and add those to their reserves, then that allows banks to buy a lot more treasuries and count them as part of the reserves, which
Until the
definitely
treasuries don't have the
helps to
value.
absorb some of the
Well,
treasuries. that
getting back to
outstanding.
Silicon Valley Bank, there was a number of things going on with them, but the one thing on the
It was
surface
Democratic run.
could be that too.
Actually, they were the ones that I mean, one of the problems, I don't mean to cut you off, but one of the problems with that bank, it was that their strength was also their weakness, which is
Correct.
that they were to a lot of the net companies, which a lot of those net companies had large amounts of reserves in the bank. And one of the difficulties, I think, inherent in banking is that you could have $1 billion because you're whatever Netflix, you've got $1 billion sitting in the bank, and at the stroke of a few keystrokes, you can move $500,000 out or $100 million out,
Mm-hmm.
and so can everybody else. And I think that's an inherent difficulty with the banks, is because people can, by getting on their computer and moving from funds from one bank to another, you no longer have to stand in line and wait for them to give you
Yeah.
cash.
So by definition,
For a
there was
run
a
on the
run.
bank.
There was a run on the bank.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one of the reasons why they got into trouble in the first place is that they had somewhat recently purchased a bunch of treasuries. And what happened in 22?
Yeah, but the treasuries are like 1% or
What happened with inflation in 2022? We saw it spike, and that inflation killed the value of these treasuries. It was just completely, really, really bad timing, and so they just basically hitched up their train to a caboose that was going to take them down, and then also, like you're saying, the ability to withdraw funds, that was Silicon Valley Bank kind of catered to the high tech community,
Right.
and so information flowed very quickly that they were having problems, and they had a humongous run on the bank. Didn't help that our FDIC, which only covers up to 125 or 250,000 per depositor, they covered depositors completely. They went way beyond those limits.
Ooh.
Yeah,
And
they came out and
I
spoke out and said, we'll cover all deposits.
Yeah, and so the reserves at the FDIC were dramatically drained far and beyond anything that would have been predicted. So yeah, if we would have had a few other significant banks that also failed around
We did.
that
We
time.
had the San Francisco Bank, which, for similar reasons, they were concerned about that, and so it went down because people were afraid that the same thing would happen, because they also had a lot of tech.
I know there
clients.
was a total of 3 that failed right around that time.
And I actually listened to the FDIC came in and spoke to a bunch of CPAs that I attended. They said everything was good at the bank, but when you lose, I don't know, $100 billion in a weekend, you can't recover from it. So even though it was solid, people were afraid that it wasn't, and that was their take on it. It should have been no problem, but enough people pulled out their money, billions of dollars, in no time flat. And I haven't heard anything from the banking side that they've resolved that. I don't know if there's a way to say that you resolve it. I mean, you can the bank can close doors for a few days and
get everybody to calm down a little bit.
Right. But
I'm still thankful we haven't had any sort of a similar period than what happened in 2007, 2008, where Ben Bernanke, our Fed chair at the time, was talking with all the heads of the banks, trying to figure out who was going to take over who.
Well, that happened in the 80s with all the S&Ls. I was right in the middle of all that.
It was more.
Oh, I was doing REO for all the banks, and man, they were foreclosing like crazy. And then before I knew it, that bank was absorbed by that bank. And then Resolution Trust came in, and they were seizing properties, and they forced Bank of America to take over another bank, and it was nuts. And the Resolution Trust, people got filthy rich off of that.
They did okay.
Oh gosh, they were foreclosing on high-rise buildings, 25 stories in Texas, and
Yeah, no, wasn't that a lot more on the commercial side of savings and loan?
commercial, yeah, and it did affect a lot of the residential because if you got residential mixed in with commercial and it went down because of the commercial, it affected everything.
Right. Well, because the savings and loans had residential and commercial, and so it affected all parties.
Everything. And so banks were being absorbed, totally shut down. Everything was transferred over through the bankruptcy, went into the resolution trust. They got real creative on selling off all that stuff. I mean, there were incredible deals that were being made over the top. I mean, they had buildings that were 90% vacant. So they were selling the buildings with no money down, no payments, no interest until they got to 70% occupied.
Wow.
Once they were 70% occupied, then the loan was put in there. I mean, it was
deals that you could never fathom.
You could never fathom were available in those days. It was the Wild West. It was.
And really,
that was in the 80s.
It sounds like it all has to do with liquidity, which is the lending side of everything. Like, and that's what we experienced in 08 and 09 is nobody was lending.
Right, but you got to remember, and we all have short memories. Was the 80s that far away? Well, it was to somebody that was born in 2000. But in the 80s, the interest rates were 17 and 18% on a straight mortgage.
Yeah.
You know, trying to do real estate in those days, you had to get extremely creative. I always say that the stuff that we used to do in those days, you could probably lose your license for if you did them today. But it was okay, and it was allowed, and that's what you did.
Yeah. Right.
And then the hard money financing and purchase money financing was really, really, really big in those days because that's the only way you could do business. Seconds and thirds and purchase money notes and then all the seminars were going over buy houses, no money down. We'll show you how to really screw the system. We'll show you how to defraud. I mean, they had seminars doing that because I went to them all.
That's crazy.
Because I was a hard money lender and I went to all these things to figure out the scams and the finagling and the craziness that they did. And I'd be sitting there in a transaction that come across my desk. I could read right through what they were doing and we denied the loan. Because I went to all these seminars to see how not to really do it.
Yeah, not to create mortgage fraud.
Yeah. And they were freely doing all these seminars.
Right.
It was quite interesting. That's how I got my education.
I went to a similar one, I want to say in 08, and a local loan officer was talking about his scratch and dent loans he was getting from Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
And
selling the pools.
And do you want to be involved in that? And you got to talk to this person and start your LLC. And by the way, this person, not too long after that, was arrested.
Yeah.
The sheriff.
Yeah.
And the FBI and the Department of Justice all visited him on the same day.
Yeah.
And cleaned out his files. And,
he was selling portfolios he didn't own. He was doing all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
I had so many of those scratch and dent and then pools of REOs that you could bid on. I got involved in that. One of the banks that I was affiliated with REOs, they actually bought a lot of these big portfolios, but they bought them directly from the bank, Chase or Wells or whatever, and they just bought them up, and they were a Wall Street conglomerate. And so they had billions and billions of dollars. There was no way a person like me or us, or even if we put an LLC and say, I got $5 million or $10 million could go and actually acquire any of those portfolios or any of those notes and stuff.
And they don't, just so you know, those loan programs, the NEGAM loans have not come back.
Yeah.
I've heard people mention here or there that, be on the lookout, that like they might be coming back.
All right. So another question on the DSCR loans, because I'm seeing that become much more common over the last 5 years or
yes,
so.
yes.
I think Blackstone came out with the first one, which is essentially for residential pools or properties. It is, you have 5 properties and you want to get a loan over the top of them. They'll do a commercial mortgage over residential property. And
There was a local bank here that, if it made sense, they would do it. So if you were an investor and you own, say, 8 or 9 properties, and it could be mixed use, you could have a commercial, you could have residential, single family. What they did is, if it was here in the Sacramento all the way to the Bay Area and you own those properties in that circle, the territory, they would do one commercial loan over all of them and treat it as a commercial loan. And then what they would do then is you could push properties out of that loan and push properties in the loan once a year. So if
really? You could swap properties?
Yeah. So what they did, and I thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because they still had an equity position.
Mm-hmm.
So they just blanketed the loans off over all the properties.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened then is now we have the 10 loan rule. In real estate, a single family, you can only get 10 and then you got a problem. Once you actually get up to 7, you start having qualifying problems to get to the 10, correct?
And I haven't looked at the rule for a while. It used to be that I want to say Fannie would allow 6 and Freddie would go up to 10,
right?
Something like that.
Well, how to circumvent that was you would go to one of these banks that would put a loan over all of your real estate. So now you have one loan encumbering a whole bunch of real estate. Now you can go out and do 3, 4, 5 more residential loans on non-owner occupied. So now you're up to 4 or 5. So in a year, you can take those, roll those into the larger loan, and then they would rewrite the loan and create a package. So now you're back to one loan again. So as you had equity position in that portfolio, you can then spin one off and sell it because the equity position in the portfolio still was there. And you're making payments on that one big loan. And again, it was mixed use. So you could have a small little strip center, a little small office building, or maybe a 5-unit or a 10-unit complex along with single family.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are some lenders that will do that.
We had a source a few years ago that did cross-collateralized, cross-collateral loans.
So the equity from one property would allow for the qualification of another?
Basically, yeah. One loan could, like Mike is saying, one loan could cover multiple properties.
Correct.
And so, yeah, that gave you some flexibility that you don't get with I've had people over the years kind of suggest doing that. But yeah, we need to have a lender that, because obviously it's a little more complicated than one APN and one loan and one owner in general. But yeah, DSCR loans, they become very, very, very popular. We have a number.
And it's
number
basically
of
if there's enough income from the property validating the loan rather than the quality of the person's credit and income.
Yeah, we do look at minimum FICO scores, but again, their minimum income, personal income is not considered. It's how much of a down payment is required to make the income and the debts pencil out. And in general, we want to minimally see that the debts or that the income cover the carrying costs, the maintenance costs.
Right. So what are you looking at? I know that historically it's been 1.2 from at least from banks' commercial side previously, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now I hear that people say 1.2, but realistically they want 1.25 or 1.35 or 1.4.
I've seen them go down to like 0.7, 0.8.
Really?
So even below 1.
Under what circumstances would they do that?
Maybe the higher FICO scores or a higher down payment.
Okay.
but to me, this is a really straightforward loan program.
Mhm.
And so, we're looking at that servicing ratio. And so the better the ratio, the better terms you're going to get.
Okay. Does that mean the higher interest rate if you're, if you have
You're going to
less
get
income relative
Correct.
to the cost of the loan?
Correct. And that's one of the
Lower
reasons to
payment.
shop around. Different lending sources will have different coverage ratios that are allowed.
Okay. So what are the typical DSCRs? What kind of rate do they want?
Add 1.5% to your single family home.
So if it's 6% right now, it'd be 7.5 to 8.
Yeah.
Oh, 7.5. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And we do have average 30-year rates approaching 6.5% again.
okay. Now the ones that I've heard, they'll have a prepayment on those. I know at least with Blackstone, this was years ago, but the way they structured it was that they would wrap it up, create a commercial mortgage, and wrap up 5 properties, let's say, do a commercial mortgage, and then they would sell the bonds on those. They get the money back for what they had invested in the properties and be paying bonds. So they're taking the spread in between, which I thought was brilliant. I still think is brilliant. Now, but I don't know if banks are doing that. Are they doing it with their own capital? Or are they also creating bonds? Or is it, obviously
that
Blackstone is Wall Street.
I got to say, I have no knowledge in that area.
Okay.
On the secondary markets.
But the ones you saw were from banks or from other lenders.
A private lender, you can call it a bank.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I imagine if there's some potential for a secondary market, why wouldn't you take advantage of that?
Right.
But a prepay, a 1-year prepay is very, very common. And, if you're willing to subsidize it with the higher rate, you can get no prepays on these as well.
Okay.
And so, but you got to look at the reality is how long do you think you're going to, if you're buying this home now, isn't it safe to assume you're probably going to have it for a year rather than are you looking to?
1 year prepay is no big deal. You can get through a year in a
lot of
heartbeat.
people purchasing with DSCRs, the ones that I'd seen where they already have a portfolio of properties, so they're refinancing all of the properties with the
Some
DSCR.
will, they, if they have that hard money loan that's becoming due, then that's a common entry point to look at a DSCR loan.
Okay. Can they tie a credit line to that also? No, the one I was talking about, they also tie it in a credit line based on your equity. So you can actually just write a check based on that equity. So it was the coolest loan I'd ever seen. Now the interest rate's a little bit higher, but and then the loan would readjust every year. It would be, because it's a commercial loan. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my goodness, for somebody that is in growth mode, it's really, really a great way to do that. And you had a credit line. So as the equity increased, you had a credit line that you can just go write a check and buy a property or down payment or whatever.
What was the term, the amortization term? Was it 15 or 20 years?
No, I think it was 20 years. It was a 20-year amortization in commercial loan.
Yeah.
And that's on the long side on the commercial.
It's on the long side, yeah.
Area, yeah.
And then it would probably be a 5-year call. So you had to refinance in 5. Mm-hmm. So then they would come and reanalyze the portfolio and rewrite the loan.
Yeah, we do have other sources. The ones that specialize in DSCR are different than the ones that will do the fix and flip loans. Mm-hmm. And the ones that will do fix and flip will also offer they'll offer like a line of credit, which I think is what you're thinking of. So
this was inside the loan. Mm-hmm. So you had your main loan, and as your equity position and your debt went down and you had a value, you had a credit line all built into it.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely possible. So
cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming today.
You got it.
We got a little out of the weeds there a little bit. We're into the weeds.
Dug a hole.
So hopefully, people will understand what we talked about. But I love this kind of stuff.
Thank you so much.
I didn't feel like we got too much out of the weeds.
No.
But yeah.